what have people been feeling during 2020? So there's two ways to look at 2020 in COVID, and maybe we've done a bit of both. Maybe more people have done this bit than the positive bit. This is like the hindering side of things, okay? What have people been feeling during COVID? So, first of all, lots of change. And we know when we get stuck in transition, it causes terrorist-like action, which I'll share with you in a moment, okay? I'll flash the transition curve up and I'll just point out that rut for the people that haven't seen it before. People's esteem, people's esteem has been hit. People have felt low, a little bit lethargic maybe as well because of it, okay? Low motivation. It's been difficult to get motivated. There's been a few challenges to keep us going. If you add in the changes of maybe working at home, then working in the office, and everything that's gone on. So motivation has been hit as well. People have been lonely. Isolation impact, which is what we did last week, isn't it? That it's a real thing. People haven't been able to have those chats in the corridor or the chat around the coffee machine or whatever it may be, okay? Anxious. People have been feeling anxious, okay? Anxious and annoyed and wary. People have been feeling depressed. Some people have got to that point where they've just gone, do you know what, this is utterly rubbish, I want to close my eyes and wait for next year, wait for the vaccine to come, okay? People have been feeling exhausted. This is quite a big one as we get to the end of the year. On the 18th of December, I'll be doing two sessions just before Christmas, okay? The Friday before the week of Christmas. And the first one is going to be It's Christmas, How to Stay in the Moment. And the other one is around mindfulness and some little tips on being mindful during that Christmas period. And the reason I've put them in on the 18th, which is a Friday, by the way, so not a normal day that we do these things. So the reason, there we go, up to 30 people now, okay. The reason I've put this in on the 18th of December is because there's lots of people telling me they feel a bit tired, they feel a bit worn out, they feel a bit burnt out. I mean, don't get me wrong, I think there are some people out there that constantly tell themselves that, so you're always going to be that. But I think genuinely there is a tiredness, maybe across the nation it's been a long year, hasn't it? And you know what I mean by when I say a long year. So we've got to watch for this one, because when we're exhausted, it can flip our behaviour from helpful to hindering, okay? Stressed, and we're doing stress management at 11:30 today. If you're interested, we've got a section, we've got a presentation on that. And there you go, tired, that's in there. So I don't think anybody would maybe look at that and go, I haven't been any of them. I haven't done any of that. If you haven't, fantastic, brilliant. I look at it, and if I was to pick for me, I think anxious was probably the biggest thing for me, with having to change the way that we deliver in the business and change the business around, and for furloughing the team back in March, and I think there was quite a lot of anxiety that went on there. It certainly led to a little bit of tiredness, a little bit of burnout, if you like, because working extra hours to try and get a new way to do things and all that, excuse me, all that type of stuff. So I think there's a couple of things that is kind of affected me, but the key is how long this affects you for. So it's okay if you've been, impacted by one of these things, but what we need to try and do now is flip it and have a look at the other side of the coin, and actually the good stuff that we can take out of this year, as well as knowing how it's made us feel sometimes, okay? So bearing in mind, all of this comes, okay, when you're in transition, okay? Now, a number of you will have seen this before, so I'm not going to spend a long time on it. If you're new, please go back and look on the YouTube channel. There's loads of times I've been doing this change and transition curve. There's a specific one around change, I think. So remember, product and energy up here and time along the bottom. We're quite happily going along and the change happens. After a change takes place, our productivity drops and we go into shock. Okay, and when you're in shock, you can't be as productive as you were. After shock occurs, we actually start to talk ourselves out of the change and our productivity goes back up and we go into denial. Okay, so that makes us feel a little bit better, so we start to deny what the change is actually really meaning, and so on and so on and so on and so on. And then the realization of the change starts to take hold, okay? And we start to drop down this transition curve. So you might feel like you've been bumped over the head, so that's the kind of the whack round the head. You might feel frustrated or anxious or angry, or you might feel low, sad, depressed, tired, exhausted, okay? Which is all those words that we've just seen. So this is where you start to feel those bad things during any type of change. It's on this downward curve, and then we get stuck in the rut. And if you remember, this rut at the bottom, there's an exclamation mark there, and there's a reason for that. That's the point, the worst and the best place to be. It's the best place to be because it's the point of realization. So it's the point where you realize you can then get your head around what's going on and move forward. However, but before you get to that point, it's also the worst point to be, because that's when you are at your lowest. And let me tell you, ladies and gents, this is where organisational terrorists are born, okay? So I know I'm using COVID as an example for this session, as COVID made you a player or a terrorist. However, imagine this is an organisational change, okay? So the change has come in, people have got into shock, then they've got into denial, so it might be a restructure, for argument's sake, yeah? You know, I don't want to touch on any nerves here. I know a number of you guys have been going through restructure and contracts and all that type of stuff. This will happen, okay? Change, shock, denial, then the realization of the change takes hold and people get to the low point. Now this is where you will find terrorists are born, organisational terrorists, okay, or cultural terrorists if you're looking at it from a COVID point of view. So in a business, people then start working against the grain, okay? So they start working kind of rowing the other way, and I'll come on to that in a little while. If you go trying to go this way, they'll try to drag you back that way. We've seen this with COVID. We've seen people down here with COVID, people that are dancing around the streets of Liverpool and Manchester when the bars close at 10 o'clock with no masks on, as close as they like to each other. That's terrorist-like behaviour. That's revolting against, yeah, and not acting about it in the right way. If they were acting about it in the right way, if they really thought that it was wrong what the government was doing, they would still be safe. They would put a process together, they would wear masks, they would social distance, and they would go and picket 10 Downing Street. So that's what players would do, okay? Terrorists, they just move against it, okay? But this is where they're born, in this little rut here, and that's quite important to know in an organisation, because if you've got them, that's where they will have been born. And when somebody's not feeling great, anxious, angry, fed up, depressed, whatever it may be, okay? And of course, changes take time, don't they? So depending on the time, I mean, we've got a little dip here. Imagine if that dip came all the way down and then started going up. That dip can be a lot longer than that little dip that you've got there, or you can try and make it a little bit shorter and get people through it in a more effective way. So we all know what helps people through change: information, involvement, and individual attention. Those three things, I haven't got them for you today on a slide, but I'll reiterate those again to help people through this: information, involvement, and individual attention, okay? So this is where some people have turned in to being a terrorist. So we just need to make that point. This is the place in change. However, it is also the point of realization. So what a good player would do at this point is they would start to try and explore the new ways of the world. Okay, they would start to try and explore the new ways of the world. And some days they're going to try and get up, and some days they might slip back down and have a bad day. But at some point, they get to a point of acceptance. That's what players ultimately do. They look for the good. They've come down here. They've felt a bit of pain, but they look for the good. Try and work out how they can move forward, explore the new ways of learning, and then get to the point of acceptance and get through transition. Whereas terrorists generally stop here, and they hang around here as long as they possibly can. If you have people in your business that are still moaning about something that happened 10 years ago, they are stuck in transition. And I can't see your faces today, but I'm sure some of you just smirked or smiled when I said that. People in your business that are still moaning about stuff that happened 10 years ago, they are stuck in transition. In other words, they are portraying terrorist-like acts. They are moaning about something without taking any action on it, and a moan without any action is just a terrorist-like act. So we want to try and avoid that. Okay, so there's different mindsets when it comes to looking for opportunities, even in adversity. Okay, there are different mindsets when it comes to looking for opportunities, even in adversity. So if you've got your terrorist-like people, first of all, we have a negative approach to looking for opportunities. Okay, because that's really the difference between a player and a terrorist. A terrorist will just go with what they're given and moan about it. A player will go with what they're given and look for opportunities to move it forward. Okay, so a terrorist will tell you there are no opportunities in life. So those people currently, when it comes to COVID, are telling us it's still all bad, it's still a nightmare, it still hasn't been fixed, it's going to be terrible next year as well, and so on and so on and so on and so on. Okay, there's no opportunities to put it right, even though this morning the first 90-year-old granny had the first vaccine that was rolled out this morning. I saw it on the news. That happened today. First vaccine has come about, so there is some light at the end of the tunnel. But a terrorist will go, no, I'm not taking a vaccine. It's going to turn us all into zombies, and so on and so on and so on. Now, look, taking the vaccine is a personal choice, isn't it, at the end of the day, yeah? But if you're moaning about the virus and there's a potential answer to it and you refuse the answer, then look for another opportunity. That's all I'm going to say basically on the matter. So they will tell you there are no opportunities that come along. Then they will also tell you that there are opportunities, but they will ignore them. So they might see an opportunity, but it's a bit too hard work, isn't it? It's a bit too hard work. We don't want to do this, we don't want to do that, so we'll just ignore them. So this is a very, very simple mindset for a terrorist-like behaviour. They'll either tell you that there are no opportunities, nothing good ever happens to me, or I'll ignore opportunities when they come along because they're too much hard work. Okay? Then you have kind of a neutral mindset. And we call, you'll see this in a moment, we call these people like spectators in a business as well. So I'll share this model with you in a moment. But spectators are people that want to do well but aren't that confident to go out and actually find it for themselves. They'll have to wait until something comes along and then they will take the opportunity. So this is like a neutral mindset here. Like if an opportunity comes along and it falls in my lap, I will go and I will take it. Okay? Then you've got the player mentality. So the players don't just wait to take opportunities. They're not interested in the red stuff either. What they will do is they will go to look to seek out opportunities. They will be actively looking for ways to make themselves more productive, happier, more professional, more successful, whatever it may be. Okay? They will seek them out. And then ultimately, the ultimate mindset is if they can't seek them out, okay, if they're looking and they can't find it, they won't just be content with continuing to look for opportunities. They will create their own opportunities. Okay, they will create their own. And in all honesty, when COVID happened and we went into the first lockdown, I think I kind of started here and ended up here. Yeah, so I did a little bit of, on that downward curve of change, we all get bumped, we all feel bad, even players. You know, players don't just jump that part and go, everything's brilliant. They go through the pain as well. You know, and I remember going, all the training's been cancelled, nobody wants any training, oh my God, the business is going to close, no opportunities, what we're going to, it wasn't even what we're going to do, it was we can do nothing. We can do nothing about this, okay? But then I think I jumped and kind of started going, okay, well, how can we do this differently? How can we get our message out, without actually physically being in the room with somebody? How can we do that effectively so the feedback is good and they get body language and so on and so on and so on and so on, okay? And then we built the studio and so on, as you know, and hopefully created the opportunities which, we did to be able to work with you guys and other clients going forward. So it was a journey through these things that we have. We don't just jump from here to here. It's a bit of a journey that we go through. However, ultimately, terrorist mindsets are going to be here. Player mindsets are going to be here. That's the difference between the two. And you can see I've kind of got my red, amber, green going on here. Okay? 5 different mindsets when it comes to opportunities, and you can normally tell whether somebody's a player or a terrorist by the way they're talking about what they can possibly achieve and what they can or what they can't do. Okay, so red mindsets tell you what they can't do on a regular basis. Green mindsets tell you what they could possibly do on a regular basis. Okay, so just bear that in mind. So if we've got this green mindset, then what have people been feeling during 2020? Well, as you can see here, we've gone to a green slide now. Excuse me. Rather than the first slide we had. So if you remember on the first slide, we had worn out, fed up, exhausted, stressed, low self-esteem. We had all that type of stuff on the first one. Some people have done this during COVID, okay? Some people have embraced the change. It doesn't mean they haven't gone through the pain, but they've gone through the pain of change, they've dealt with it quickly, and they've got back out the other end quicker than the people on the first slide. They've had to think differently and come up with new ideas of new ways of working and new ways of socializing and new ways of making sure your family are okay and so on and so on and so on. So what it's done is it's generated their brain to think differently, and that was the sense of urgency that's done that. It's generated the brain to think differently. Like I said, and I've said this to a number of people on these sessions, if I'd said to your line managers, your bosses, back in the middle of March, guys, you've got 2 weeks. You've got 2 weeks to make sure you can continue to run this business. Nobody's allowed into the office, or you're only allowed into office sporadically. Everybody needs to be able to work from home, which means everybody needs to be empowered and trusted to go and do the job. I'll guarantee you the answer would have been, it can't be done. There's no way we can do it. Just no way. We don't have the time, we don't have the money, we don't have the resource, we don't have da-da-da-da-da-da-da. All the reasons why you couldn't do it would come out. However, it was done. And that was done because people had to come up with new ways of operating, new ways of thinking. So one of the best things that COVID's give us is it's give us a good recall memory of knowing that we can adapt very, very quickly and think in new ways, whereas a lot of people would tell us it was impossible before. I've got examples of a major insurance company in the city, only a third of that population, 25% actually, of that population had mobile technology. The rest of the people came into the city, went to their computers every day, didn't have laptops and stuff like that. And within 7 days, 78% of that company were mobile. That's how quickly things can happen. So one of the best things, like I've said, new ideas, new ways of thinking that's come out. New ways of working, as we've just said there. New ways of operating. Some people that have taken this on, we talked about this last week, some people have rearranged their day a little bit and are going out for a walk in the middle of the day so they can get some fresh air and feel a little bit more energized when they come to work, and so on and so on and so on. Yeah, some people are picking the kids up from school and then coming back to it, and things like that. So new ways of working. Advantage Advantage DT. Do you know what? I wrote that last night and I can't remember what it is now. Taking advantage of downtime. That's what it was. There you go. Taking advantage of downtime. So some people, for instance, were furloughed and moaned about being furloughed. Some people were furloughed and took advantage of the fact that they had some free time back, and you've seen them all on Facebook and stuff, haven't you? Doing, like, you know, I built a workshop. I mean, I wasn't furloughed, but I was still getting home at 5 o'clock at night, which was unheard of for me. It's normally 8, 9 o'clock at night when I'm travelling around the country. So I thought, you know what, I've got another 2 or 3 hours in my day, so I built a 24-foot workshop in my garden from scratch. And you see these things all on Facebook and things like that, don't you? People that have redecorated and put in new fireplaces. That seems to be a fad at the moment, doesn't it? Like a false fireplace and stuff with the TV on it and that. You know, people have been doing this and making that and so on and so on. And so some people have really taken advantage of the downtime that they've had compared to when they were running around like a headless chicken before. And the great thing about this is this: the people that were moaning about being furloughed, or moaning about, you know, having more time, you know, and not being able to work, are the same people that were moaning before lockdown that they didn't have enough time. And that's what I'm talking about with this, like, terrorist-like action. There's no kind of win with these people. It's like one thing or the other. Some people have learned new skills during lockdown. People have told me they've been either reading more books to learn more stuff. People have picked up new hobbies. One person I spoke to the other week started to learn how to play the guitar. People have had new skills because of COVID. Reflection. People have had time to stop and reflect. So those people that have taken advantage of COVID have actually gone, ooh, do you know what? I've done some of that reflection. You know, I had a conversation about this yesterday with one of my team and going, do you know what? Let's not get back to the point where I'm doing, you know, 5 parts of the country in 4 days again. Let's be a little bit more sensible about this, actually, and, you know, let's do things a little bit differently going forward again, rather than getting to headless chicken point again, yeah, and because it's no good for me, it's no good for the customer, and so on and so on and so on. So again, time to reflect on what's important. You know, more time with your family, more time with your children, obviously, when they were off school, and, you know, seeing them and all that type of stuff, okay? Family time, as I've said there. When I say family time, I know there's going to be some people on the call that are going to go, yeah, well, we couldn't see our family. Yeah, well, I know, I understand that, but, you know, people are actually talking to their families on video calls more than they would have done if they would normally have just not seen their family. Anyway, so some people have actually used and taken it to advantage. Some people have been less stressed. They've embraced the slower pace for a little while. Yeah, we've all been a little bit slower in pace, haven't we, for a little while, which has been lovely. Yeah, so some people have been a little bit less stressed. Yeah, and some people have tied up loose ends. What I mean by that is finished things they've been meaning to do for ages. Yeah, in the background. So this is the good. Excuse me. This is the good side of COVID. So as you can see now, there is a difference between how we look at things. Do we look at things with a terrorist mindset, or do we look at things from a player mindset? And sometimes we have to get through a bit of that pain, and a little bit of that terrorist comes out. But then true players, they pick up the opportunities that are given to them in adversity, and they roll with them. So, some of you will remember this model. I'm not going to go through it all in detail because we don't have time, but it's really, really important that we know sometimes what causes that terrorist-like reaction. So, this is a cognitive model. We have behaviour at the top of the tree. The reason this is a tree is because the nutrients go into the soil at the bottom of the tree to give you green or brown leaves. On the good side of the tree, we have peak performance or worst performance on the other side of the tree. So, player, terrorist. Okay? What is it that gives us our performance? It is our emotions. When we feel great, we are likely to get to peak performance. When we feel lousy, we are likely to get to work performance. That's why there's been quite a lot of terrorist-like action during COVID, because the situation, people are allowing the situation to make them feel lousy, okay? And there are some genuine reasons why people can feel lousy, I understand that, right? But when you feel lousy, you generally get worse type behaviour that comes out, okay? If you can try and take the opportunities and make yourself feel better about the situation, you're going to get peak performance that comes out, which is a player mentality. However, some people are currently, and even still today, doing this. Some people are feeling lousy and pretending to be at their best. Now, what this does is it causes stress. So we call this the stress line. For those that have seen me speak before, it's also lack of gestalt, lack of balance, lack of equilibrium in the system, okay? It also causes a little bit of terrorist-like action as well, because you feel lousy and try and be at your best, but sometimes it'll revert and you'll get to worst instead. So this causes stress, an imbalance of chemical. The internal picture in your head does not match the outside world. You try and pretend that everything's okay, and all of a sudden you get very, very stressed. Okay? Now, I understand why people try and pretend things are okay. I do that quite a lot as well. Something's not right, you know, kind of push it to one side. It's fine, it's fine, it's fine. But unless it's dealt with properly, unless you deal with it further down this tree in your head, unfortunately, you'll feel bad and you have to pretend to be at your best. So this is the stress line. So if you are interested, at 11:30 today, we are doing a session on stress management, okay? So if that's going to be of some interest, jump on that session, okay? Because I think you'll probably find it really, really quite useful. Oh, a couple more people that have joined us there. Okay, your emotions drive your behaviour. It's our attitude that drives our emotions. On the good side of the tree, we have a positive mental attitude. On the bad side of the tree, we have a negative mental attitude. Okay, so your attitude, now attitude is a choice. I haven't got time to go into what attitude is today, but ultimately it's a choice. The best description of attitude I can give you is your approach to. So your attitude is your approach to. Okay, so it can either be positive or negative, and it is a choice. It's an individual choice. However, it is based on your beliefs. Your beliefs drive your attitude. When you have a player, they have inspiring beliefs about what they can achieve, how they can fix the problem, and how they can move forward. If you have a terrorist, they have self-limiting beliefs of what they can't do, which gives them a negative attitude, makes them feel lousy, and you get worse type behaviour. Ultimately, all of your beliefs come from your conditioning. Now, our conditioning is given to us by lots of different people: managers, parents, teachers, society, peers, media, and so on and so on and so on. It all bombards us. However, the biggest conditioner of you is you. Now, what I mean by that is every single piece of self-talk you've ever had. If you're new to these sessions, again, go onto the YouTube channel and look for all the self-talk stuff that we've done in the past. But you talk to yourself on average every 7 seconds. Every 7 seconds there is some type of internal dialogue in your head. It is either helpful or hindering. Okay? When you talk to yourself, I can do this, I can't do this. Either way, all of that self-talk adds up to 90% of your conditioning. 90% of how you behave comes from what you're saying in your head. So, if you want to be a player and not a terrorist, there's a certain recipe that we've got to follow. First of all, this is what terrorists do. Terrorists beat themselves up in their own head, tell themselves that things can't be achieved, okay, and there's no point in trying. That gives them self-limiting beliefs, that in turn gives them a negative attitude, that then makes them feel lousy, and then you get worst type behaviour. So that's where the terrorist behaviour is coming from. Players, they go up the other side of the tree. They talk to themselves in a great way, helpful self-talk, that builds some inspiring beliefs, that gives them a positive attitude towards trying new things, that will make them feel great and finally get peak performance. So really, when it comes to being a player or a terrorist, it starts here. It starts with where you put the nutrients in the soil. Okay? A little bit of Miracle-Gro. Yeah? You put the Miracle-Gro in here, you get green leaves on the tree. If you don't water the tree and you don't put any miracle grow in, which is just like talking to yourself in a bad way, you're going to get worse type behaviour. So this is where that behaviour comes from. And I say, if this is the first time you've seen this, I apologise, because it's normally a 2 or 3 hour model on its own, this model. But I wanted to share it with you because, again, this is what drives the player or terrorist mentality, okay, when it comes on there. So let's get on to these players and terrorists then, okay? Now, this is a model that you're not going to share with other people, okay? This is a model that you're not going to put names in boxes or anything like that. And yes, we're using words like players and terrorists because they're emotive words and you will remember them when they go, okay? So here we go. What we've got is 4 boxes, okay? On this side of the force here, we've got people that are bought in, so good attitude. These 2 boxes, good attitude, so player mentality, if you like. On this side, bad attitude, okay, so more terrorist-like behaviour. Across the top, you've got people with high confidence and high self-belief. And across the bottom, you've got people with low self-belief, maybe low motivation as well. Okay, so this is the actual, it's called the 4 types of people, this model, but this is where you'll see them. So, in the top box here, okay, so if you're into Star Wars, this is like the good side of the Force, this is the dark side of the Force, okay, so like Jedis and like Vaders over here, okay? If you're not into Star Wars, you don't know what I'm talking about. So let's crack on, shall we? So in this top right-hand box that you've got here, this top right-hand box, we've got people that are bought in, so in other words, good attitude, positive mental attitude here, high confidence in their own ability, okay, and highly motivated to do a good job. So these are the people, as you probably guessed, we call organisational players, okay? These are the people that come in, work hard every day, do the job. If you had a rowing boat, the player would be at the front of the boat rowing towards the goal, okay? So I'm pretty sure I've got a group full of 33 players, okay? I'm pretty sure I've got a group full of that many people. Let's just have a quick look. Yeah, I'm pretty sure on there, you're all players. Fantastic, happy days. Yeah, you can tell me different later, right? So, players can do, will try, good people, all right? We don't need to say anything more about these people. They're not yes men and women, no, but they don't just nod aimlessly and take orders. They will challenge things if they believe that they need to challenge things, but they'll challenge them in the right way. Excuse me, in the right way, okay? So, players. Then we come down to this box here. So in this bottom box here, what we've got is still people that are bought in, so good attitude. This time lower self-belief, maybe lower motivation, but it's normally confidence. We call these people the organisational spectators. Now I mentioned them earlier. Spectators are good people, but they don't necessarily, they're not right at the front of the queue. Okay, their confidence level is a little bit low. If you are a leader on this course and you think you've got one of these in your team, if you help them with their confidence, then you could well get them into the player box. You could move them up, okay? But these people, good people, come in, they'll try hard, they won't be at the front of the queue like a player, but in the rowing boat, the player is rowing towards the goal and the spectator is helping when he needs to, okay? So, good people, if your team, if you have the foundation of a team with these 2 types of people in it, then with some work, you can create a high-performing team on the back of it, okay? Which is all good, right? Then we've got the dark side of the force over here, okay? So we've got people that are not bought in. But before we come up and deal with the terrorists, which we know here, let's come down here. So this is somebody I've not mentioned yet. So down here in this corner, what we've got is somebody that's not bought in, so bad attitude, low confidence and low motivation. Okay, so in other words, not bothered, right? We call these people the organisational corpses. Okay, now I know if you haven't heard this, me do this before, some of you have just chuckled to yourself now. So what is a corpse in a business? an organisational corpse is somebody that's disengaged, not bothered, haunt your corridors, these people. These are the people that retired a couple of years ago and didn't tell anybody else. Okay? So, you know, they're just disengaged, but they don't cause you a lot of trouble because they're not even that bothered. They're just kind of a little bit miserable on their own. Does that make sense? In the rowing boat, the players at the front rowing towards the goal, spectators helping him when he needs it. The corpse either doesn't know why he's in the boat, yes, or isn't bothered. In other words, dead weight. So now what you've got is you've got a player rowing towards the goal. You've got a spectator that's helping him, but now the boat's a bit heavier because you've got somebody in there that's disengaged, that's not bothered, okay? So we need to re-engage these people, otherwise they make your journey they make your journey a lot more difficult to make, okay? And then finally, we've got this box up here, which is the box we've been talking about since we started, really, isn't it? Which is people that are not bought in, so bad attitude, okay? Highly confident, though, in their own ability, and highly motivated for their own end. Not the team end or the business end, for their own end. We call these people the organisational terrorists, okay? And that's the word that we've been using. And I'm going to explain why I'm using the words player and terrorist in a moment, okay, where they came from for you, right? But an organisational terrorist, they spend 75% of their time doing just enough not to get into trouble. So you won't get them on skill because they're clever, okay? So they'll spend 75% of their time doing just enough not to get into trouble, and then spend the other 25% of their time recruiting these two poor people into their fold. Now, these people are quite influential along with these people. So players and terrorists are both quite influential people in an organisation. Spectators and corpses are more followers. So whoever's the most influential, potentially, they're going to follow them. So this is why it's really, really important that we deal with terrorist-like behaviour. First of all, we know where it comes from. It comes from change, doesn't it? It comes from moving up the wrong side of the tree, getting stuck in the rut, all the type of stuff that we talked about so far today. So as leaders, and as people and colleagues in a business, we need to try and fix this. So you imagine a memo comes out. The memo says you're going on a solution-focused thinking skills course. That's what the memo says, okay? The player gets the memo, reads the memo, and says, oh, this is great, some development, that's brilliant. I'm going to go and check the website, see if there's any free work. Fantastic, tick the box, right? And the reason why I think the majority of you guys must be players is because you've come on today, you are learning, you are educating yourself, yeah, you're finding out more. That's what players do. Yeah, they learn, they play. I know I said it a bit tongue-in-cheek earlier on, yeah? But you learn, and that's what players do. They learn and adapt, okay? So, a player's gone. They're ready for the course. Spectator gets the memo. I'll see you there in the morning. They'll turn up, okay? Corpse doesn't know what memo you're on about, right? Or they're not bothered, okay? The terrorist gets the memo, okay? And the terrorist gets the memo. He puts one arm around the spectator, one arm around the corpse, and says, let me tell you what this course is really about. They're sending us on a solution-focused thinking skills course, so what they're saying is we're thick, and we need development, and we can't think, and we've been here 10 years doing it the way we've been doing it. It's all been rubbish. These two people, a little bit lower confidence, are going, yeah, he might have a point. And all of a sudden, you've got a little den of moaners that starts to spread. Now, a terrorist won't take on a player, because a player's likely to tell him to go and, jump. Yeah, don't bother me because I'm busy. But these two people can be influenced by them. So we've got to stop the terrorist-like behaviour. So this is why I started out with the question today. And we looked at those two very different slides on the negative impact of COVID and then the positive impact of COVID, and which one did you do? Did you do them both? Did you do a bit of the bad stuff first? I did. and then you moved into that player box. We all know there are people still stuck in that terrorist stuff, don't we? We all know people are still whinging and moaning. People are still telling us how bad it is. People are still telling us it could be worse. Players are saying it could be worse, but terrorists are still going, oh, it's going to go on for another 12 months. It's going to go, yeah, and so on. And now, I heard my first moan yesterday about Brexit. It's the first time I've heard a moan since lockdown in March. But it's starting to come back in, because now we're starting to deal with COVID. Yeah? Now we're starting to deal with COVID. Terrorists need something else to moan about. Something else to grab on and start whinging about, yeah? And I heard my first whinge about Brexit again yesterday. Can you imagine all the people that would have been whinging if COVID wasn't here this year about Brexit? Quite interestingly, they haven't been moaning about Brexit, have they? Because there's been something bigger to moan about, yeah? So, just bear that in mind. So, if you don't deal with this type of behaviour in an organisation or a team, your players either leave or turn into terrorists. Depends on how strong your player is. A strong player will leave and go, I'm going to be valued somewhere else. A borderline player might go, well, if you can't beat them, join them. And that you could argue whether they're a player at all at that point. Okay? So we know we've got to deal with them. The key question is, how do you deal with terrorists in an organisation? So, I'm going to ask you that question. So go to the chat box. Everybody go to your chat box right now. Okay? If you've got one of these in a business or a team, you can't not deal with them, because they will influence other people in the organisation. So, how do you deal with a terrorist or terrorist-like behaviour in an organisation? That's the question. What do you think? Go to the chat box and tell me what you think. How do you deal with these types of people? Let's see what we get back. There's nothing yet. Two people afraid to actually write anything. I don't know. I'm hoping the chat is still working. Yeah, the chat was working this morning. Yeah. Anybody? Ah, there we go. Thank you, Pete. Pete, you put both in for me, haven't you? I like it. It's still working. Thank you. Nobody wanted to answer the question. Thank you very much, Pete. The first point of call is, if you've got people that, is that what you were thinking, Christian, as well? If you've got people that are behaving this way, yeah, you need to deal with them, okay? Marina's put challenge them, yeah? So, if you need to, if you've got people that are doing like that are behaving in a terrorist-like way, the first thing we need to do, and as you can see there, Pete said convert them, Marina has said challenge them. The first thing you need to do is try and repair whatever broke. So that we call it a broken psychological contract. When somebody goes through change and they get stuck in that rut there, yeah? Christine's put isolate them. I'll come back to that in a point. Christine's put engage them. So, your first legal and moral thing to do, if you've got somebody that's generating this behaviour, is to actually try and work out what's wrong and help them get them back into this box. Okay? So the first point of call is to try and get people from here back over here. Because I'll guarantee you, the people that are currently terrorists in your organisation won't have come in like terrorists. More to the point, they might be terrorists more because of COVID, yeah? So your first point of call is to find out what's keeping them at the bottom of that rut. What's the pain, and how can you help them? Because if you can get them up that transition curve to the top, they will move back into the player box. That is your best way of dealing with these people. And if you do get them over into the player box, their followers, they come with them as well, okay? If that doesn't work, as Pete's rightly said, well, change them or change them. Okay? But you don't particularly want them in the organisation. This is a last resort, in my opinion. Okay? Removing them from your team or business is the last resort, and I'm sure you've got HR functionality that can help you. But the first thing is this, and I find maybe 90% of the time, actually actually, if you can really find out what's wrong with these people and help them, they move back into this box. It's not very often that we have to do this thing, but of course it is a final option. Now somebody else said, Christian said, isolate them as well, and put terrorists with players. Michael said, yes, that's a short-term fix. Okay, so you can either isolate them or surround them with players. It's like man marking them on a pitch, isn't it? Yeah. If you're playing football and Lionel Messi is in the team opposite you, you don't put one defender on him. Yeah, you put 5 defenders or 11, 11 defenders on him. Yeah. The point I'm making is, yes, you can box them in with players, but make sure they're strong players. But also, it's a short-term measure. What you really want to do is find the root cause. Hence the tree. Find the root cause. If you remember the tree model that we did, what's causing the terrorist-like behaviour? And I know that you're all thinking of other people right now, but as we started this session 50 odd minutes ago, I said that I'd done a bit of the terrorist stuff and then got the player stuff right when COVID came along. We can sometimes all be in these boxes. So I know it's easy to think of other people, but the whole point of this session, if you remember, the title was COVID, as it made us organisational players or organisational terrorists. So now I'd like you to think about yourself. When do you flip between boxes? I make a really good player. And that's not me being big-headed. I make a really good player. But that means also, when my attitude isn't right, I can make a really good terrorist as well. And terrorism doesn't have to be big, it can be small. It can be a sarcastic comment. It can be a wink. It can be asking a question in a meeting, not to get an answer, but to make a point. Okay? It can be turning up late. It can be not being online when you're supposed to be online. Yeah, in today's new world, for argument's sake. It can be having your do not disturb on, you know, just purposely because you don't want other people to know what you're doing and stuff like that. That's all that kind of stuff, yeah? So, the question is, which box are you in? Which box are you going to be in going forward? Which box do you want to be in? Well, you know, your business wants you to be here because that's what we generally promise when we got the job, by the way. When we sit in an interview, we normally tell people we're these. So we don't tell them that we're going to be these sometimes, and we certainly don't tell them we're going to do this sometimes. We normally tell them we're going to do these. So we kind of owe it to the organisation. And I know COVID has been hard, and I know it's been very, very difficult for a lot of people. I mean, fatal, hasn't it, for a lot of people. And I'm not saying don't grieve, and I'm not saying don't go through that transition curve, because that's a natural thing that we've got to do. But at some point it's a choice. Do we keep moaning? Do we keep this going along for the next 12 months, 2 years? Will there be people still whinging about it 3 years ago, going, oh, do you know what, we could have done that if it wasn't for... The point is, we can make a choice, can't we? I did promise you that I would show you players and terrorists and where these came from. This is Ernest Shackleton. Don't know if anybody's come across Ernest Shackleton before, but Ernest Shackleton was an Arctic explorer. He took a ship called the Nimrod. That's the Nimrod there. He took a ship called the Nimrod to sail to the Arctic Circle so they could walk across it to explore. On the way they went off course and the ship crashed. And he writes in his journal, he had one goal once that ship crashed. It crashed up against some... It didn't sink, it just crashed up against an ice shelf and stopped, basically, yeah? He had one goal. The goal was everybody gets out alive. And he writes in his journal, and he realised he needed to probably take half the crew and walk across the ice shelf and get to the nearest whaling station to get help, and also leave half the crew behind to man the ship, man the supplies, and also if the follow-up ship realised they'd gone off course, they also might find them. And he writes in his journal, and he split his crew into 2 types of people, players and terrorists. And he writes in his journal, which of these do I take and which of these do I leave? Do I take the players and leave the terrorists? Or do I take the terrorists and leave the players? And that's the decision he had to make, bearing in mind his goal was everybody gets out alive. So, let me tell you, he took the terrorists and left the players. And the reason for that was a little bit like the comment that we got earlier on around we got them, engage them, put terrorists with players. Yeah. The reason he wrote is he said, if I take the terrorists with me, I can manage them, I can keep them from killing each other, we can work together, and I'll leave the players behind, and the players will work together, they'll be still there when we get back. Yeah, no problem. If I take the players, when I get back, the terrorists will be dead. That's what he wrote in his journal. And that's the first earliest time those words were used about people, if that makes sense, that I can find anyway, that I've read. The book's called The Shackleton Way, if anybody's interested. It's a fantastic book, The Shackleton Way, if you want to read it. Absolutely brilliant. A more recent example of that is Sir Clive Woodward. Sir Clive Woodward, after he took over the England rugby squad, there's Sir Clive, after he took over the England rugby squad, he spent 3 months meeting everybody, learning about each other, yeah, finding out about people's attitudes and things like that, and then he called everybody to a meeting. And everybody had to turn up to the meeting, and they were ushered into one of two rooms. They didn't know why, but one of the rooms was called Energizers, the other room was called Saps. And in other words, do you energize people around you, or do you sap the life out of them? Okay? And when everybody got into the sap room, Woodward came in and he fired all of them in one go. Now, that's a bit easier for him to do than us, I'll give you that. But the point I'm making here is he fired all of them, and he got berated for it in the media because some of those people were technically very good at what they did. And he fired all of them. And when he was questioned about it in the media and said, why have you fired all these great people that can help you? Why you've now left yourself short and you've got to recruit? I don't understand. Bearing in mind, Woodward's goal was to be the best in the world, okay? The world #1. That was the goal, okay? Woodward, very simply, when questioned, said they were very technically good people, but talent is not enough. Okay? Talent is not enough. They need the right attitude in order for us to win the World Cup. Okay? He then got the Energizers together. Once all the saps had gone, he got the Energizers together and he said to the Energizers, right guys, you need to come up with what he called a teamship charter. How are you going to treat each other? How are you going to help each other? How are you going to hold each other to account? How are you going to deal with arguments? How are you going to support each other? Because that's what players, in his words, Energizers do for each other. Okay? So, Ernest Shackleton, 1907, I think. Yeah? Woodward, a few years ago. Alright? So this has come through history. We don't make these things up. You know, there are much cleverer people in the world than me that have done these things many, many hundreds of years before I try and take them, put them into a format we can use them in an organisation. Yeah? So if you want to know more on that, the Shackleton Way. Conscious of time, we're just about to finish, okay? So just to finish off, remember this. We all go through transition. We all have to go through the pain. We all have to go through the tired, the worn out, the burnout, the anxious, the whatever way it affects you. But then we get down to that rut. Terrorists stay there. That's where they stay. They stay there moaning. Players, okay, they get out. They start looking at new ways of doing things. They take the time. They use the benefit. They come up with new possibilities and they get through to acceptance. And they're pulling their spectators along the way. Because remember, in your rowing boat, the player's rowing towards the goal. Spectators helping when he needs it. Corpse doesn't know why he's in the boat. Terrorist at the back of the boat, rowing the other way, slowing things down. So we need to deal with them. But the first point of call is to find out what broke. If somebody's not acting great, go and try and help them.